Look around the room you're in right now. You've got double-paned windows, a shaded visor in your car, or maybe a pair of UV-blocking polarized sunglasses resting on your desk. If the sun gets too bright, you slip them on and go about your day. Your eyes are completely shielded from the raw, blinding physics of light. But 30,000 years ago, stepping out onto a frozen landscape after a heavy storm wasn't an outdoor adventure. It was an invitation to go completely blind. Your Ice Age ancestors lived in a world where the very ground beneath their feet could weaponize starlight and sunlight against them. In the Arctic steppes and glacial tundras, snow has an albedo effect of up to 90%, acting like a massive, parabolic mirror reflecting intense ultraviolet rays directly upward into your retinas. Within just a few hours of walking through this blinding white wilderness, a hunter would suffer from photokeratitis, severe, agonizing snow blindness. Picture your corneas literally getting sunburned until your vision completely cuts out, leaving you stranded, screaming in pain, and utterly defenseless in the middle of a frozen wasteland packed with apex predators. Losing your sight in the ice didn't just mean a temporary injury. It meant an immediate death sentence for you and a catastrophic blow to the tribe that relied on you to hunt. Yet without glass, without plastic, and without a single blueprint from modern optometry, our ancestors didn't just stumble around in the dark. They fought back. They engineered defensive vision systems so sophisticated, harnessed the physics of light so precisely, and developed triage protocols so advanced that modern scientists initially refused to believe they were built with primitive tools. They created the world's first high-performance tactical eyewear tens of thousands of years before the invention of the lens. By the end of this, the simple pair of plastic sunglasses in your drawer is going to feel like an absolute miracle. The myth of the helpless cave dweller. First, let's kill the most persistent myth about prehistoric winter survival. Picture an ancient clan navigating a blinding, snow-covered landscape, and your brain probably goes straight to a Hollywood trope. A band of ragged, dirty cavemen squinting miserably, holding their hands over their eyes, and stumbling blindly over rocks until they eventually fall into a ravine or get picked off by a cave lion. Here, what kills me, that image is dead wrong. Prehistoric humans weren't passive victims of their environment. The idea that ancient people just cowered in fear or went blind every spring is thoroughly debunked by the physical evidence left behind. You don't hunt woolly mammoths and navigate thousands of miles of shifting glacial ice by guessing where you're stepping. The archaeological record is packed with jaw-dropping proof of optical mastery. We have uncovered beautifully crafted, highly engineered facial devices preserved in the permafrost dating back thousands of years. These artifacts prove that ancient humans understood light refraction, glare reduction, and focal geometry at a master level. They didn't just survive the blinding white of winter, they conquered it. They didn't have a textbook on optics, but they had thousands of years of razor-sharp observation and survival psychology. Let me show you the 5 craziest, most brilliant methods ancient humans used when the snow tried to take their sight. 1. The pinhole physics, the Igok evolution. Here's the first one, and it starts with an invention that completely rewrote the history of eyewear. Long before anyone thought to grind glass into lenses, Arctic ancestors engineered the Igok, the world's first snow goggles. Instead of trying to block light with dark material, they carved a solid piece of caribou antler, walrus ivory, or driftwood to fit the exact contours of the human face. Then, using stone microblades, they cut a single, razor-thin horizontal slit right across the front. When modern optical scientists tested replicas of these ancient snow goggles, they discovered something mind-blowing. The narrow slit doesn't just block out 90% of the destructive, scattered UV glare. It operates exactly like a pinhole camera. By restricting the entering light to a tight, horizontal beam, it focuses the light rays directly onto the fovea of the retina. It drastically improves visual acuity, making far-off objects appear incredibly sharp and clear. It didn't just protect their eyes. It gave them a form of high-definition, tactical zoom in the middle of a blizzard. 2. The weaponized soot absorbency. Imagine you are out on a grueling, multi-day winter hunt, and you don't have time to carve a new pair of bone goggles. The sun is bouncing off the packed ice, and your eyes are starting to throb with a dull, burning ache, the first warning sign that your corneas are beginning to blister. To stop the blinding light in its tracks, ancient humans executed a simple but highly effective piece of chemical camouflage. They would reach into the cold ash of their old campfires, gather pure black soot, and heavily coat the entire area around their eye sockets and upper cheekbones. This wasn't tribal war paint. It was a highly functional light trap. Matte black soot absorbs almost all wavelengths of visible and ultraviolet light. By painting the skin around the eyes black, they prevented the blinding glare from reflecting off their skin and bouncing back into their pupils. Furthermore, they would rub the soot onto the inside of their carved wood goggles to ensure that any stray light entering from the sides was instantly absorbed rather than scattering inside the frame. It's the exact same technique modern NFL players use when they put black grease under their eyes to drop stadium glare, discovered tens of thousands of years ago in the ice. 3. The animal anatomy hijack. This next one sounds completely made up. I'm just warning you. When driftwood or ivory was scarce in the deep tundra, ancient hunters looked directly to the animals they killed for material solutions. Archaeologists have uncovered prehistoric snow goggles, made entirely from the hollowed-out hooves of Dall's sheep and caribou. They would take the discarded hoof, cleanly split it down the center, boil it in water to soften the keratin tissue, and then flatten and shape it to cut perfectly over the human eyes. Because the natural horn material of a hoof is naturally semi-translucent or completely opaque, depending on how it's scraped, it acted as a primitive, built-in tint. They would slice their signature horizontal viewing slits right through the hardened keratin. The structure was held to the head using braided caribou sinew or leather straps. They were literally walking through the frozen wilderness, looking through the processed feet of their prey to save their own vision. 4. The human not blindness triage. But what happened if a hunter got caught completely off guard, forgot their goggles, and the snow blindness actually claimed their sight? The pain of photokeratitis is described as having your eyes rubbed with coarse sand. You cannot physically keep them open, and you are rendered 100% blind for 24 to 48 hours. In a hypermobile hunter-gatherer society, a blind person out in the open is a massive liability. The tribe had an immediate emergency triage protocol. The moment a member's sight cut out, they were placed in the absolute center of a moving human knot. They would be physically tethered to the strongest trackers using leather lines, or they would hold onto a long, shared wooden walking stick called a negsik. The group would guide the blind hunter step by step, navigating by sound and collective momentum. Once they reached a temporary camp, the blind individual would be placed in a completely darkened shelter, like a subterranean pit house or a turf hut, where their eyes were packed with cold, wet moss or snow compresses to drop the inflammation until the corneal tissue could naturally regenerate. 5. The birch bark polarizers. In forested, subarctic regions where massive herds of reindeer were tracked through the trees, ancient groups turned to the unique properties of the boreal forest. They engineered temporary, throwaway snow goggles out of birch bark. Birch bark is naturally layered, flexible, and incredibly water-resistant. A hunter could slice a clean strip of bark from a tree in under 60 seconds. They would fold the bark over to create a dual-layered visor that blocked the sun descending from above, while cutting horizontal slits to view the terrain ahead. Because the inside of birch bark is naturally dark and textured, it cut down on internal reflections immediately. These weren't intended to last for years like the ivory masterpieces. They were modular, disposable, and could be manufactured on the fly in the middle of a trek. It was a perfect, zero-cost survival solution provided entirely by the architecture of the forest. The logistical genius of vision. Here, what we skip over when we talk about ancient survival. Protecting your eyesight wasn't just a personal choice. It was a massive community effort. Think about the cognitive load. To carve a pair of ivory or antler snow goggles required hours of meticulous precision craftsmanship using nothing but stone tools. You had to perfectly calculate the bridge of the nose, the curve of the cheekbones, and the exact width of the slit. If the slit was too wide, you went blind. If it was too narrow, you couldn't see the terrain or track the game. This knowledge had to be taught from elders to children, passed down through oral traditions over thousands of winters. If a group failed to pass down this technology, if they forgot to prepare their goggles before the spring thaw, the entire tribe would be struck blind within days of the sun hitting the spring ice. It was a world that demanded absolute foresight. Our ancestors looked at the blinding glare of an unforgiving landscape and engineered a physical filter to master it. Look at your sunglasses. Let's bring this full circle. Look around your modern room again. Think about how effortless your world is. If you walk outside and the sun is too bright, you don't have to spend 3 days painstakingly scraping a caribou hoof or boiling a piece of bone to keep your eyes from burning. You don't have to smear soot all over your face just to walk across a snowy parking lot. You live in a world where optical protection is completely outsourced to factories, glass lenses, and UV chemical coatings. The comfort you have right now represents a world where we have completely mastered the elements. We have taken the invisible dangers of light and turned them into a solved problem. But never forget, you possess the exact same brain chemistry, the exact same acute survival DNA, and the exact same adaptive spirit as those ancient optical engineers. You are the end product of an unbroken chain of survivors who looked out across a blinding, white prehistoric wasteland, faced the threat of total darkness, and figured out a way to see through it. The next time you slide a pair of sunglasses onto your face on a bright winter day, take just 1 second to remember the ivory goggles, the soot-stained faces, and the birch bark visors carved by firelight. Remember what it actually took to keep your sight, and understand just how extraordinary it is that you don't have to think about it anymore.